Hey Trey, how you doing? I've got your work up here. I just want to go ahead and get this in the window here. I've got two versions here. I've got this in Chrome, and I've also got the PDF up right here. So let's start with the PDF. And the reason I have the Chrome version up here is because I want to take a look at this pages right on top of each other, one above the other. That'll make more sense in 1 second. Okay, so the main thing I would really want to comment on the brochure is mostly production, typography, and images. So the reason I say in those three items are of paramount importance in this particular example is this. I see some stretched images. This image almost appears like it's stretched. I'm not positive if it is or not, but this one for sure is stretched. And we can just take a look at that, the shape of that star, and you can clearly see, and we can zoom in here to get a better look at this. But let's go over it and we take a look at that image right there, and we can clearly see that that is, darn it. Okay, InDesign's acting kind of funny. So right there, that image right there is clearly stretched, and it seems like you've placed the image there and stretched it to try to fit the area that you want it to fit. The problem with that is it's distorted. Now, as we can clearly see, when you place an image in InDesign, when you want to resize it, if you hold your shift key down while you grab that corner bounding box, that will constrain the original proportions of that placed image. So you definitely don't want to stretch it horizontally without constraining the vertical proportions so that you're maintaining the original proportions of the image. You always want to maintain the original proportions of the image. You can't stretch the image. It's a big no-no in production for graphic design. I see the same thing over here a little bit. I'm not positive if this image has been stretched, but it also seems like it has been. I think the other images mostly are okay. This one image possibly. So be sure you check those images and be sure that you make sure that when you resize those images, they're constraining the original proportion. Okay, the next thing I want to mention is your production, and let's look at your folds and your background. Now, stuff like this is problematic where you place a color on one panel but not the other panels. And then in this particular, the inside, it has 3 different panels, 3 different colors. The problem with that is that if any one of these, if this thing gets folded, so when you send this off to print and you print your 10,000 copies or whatever, and they fold it as part of the printing process, if the fold isn't exact, spot on, which, I mean, we always have to give the printer and the production a little bit of leeway, a little bit of margin for error. And if this doesn't get folded exactly, then you're going to get little slivers of color inside the fold or outside the fold. Do you see what I'm saying? And that color is from the neighboring panel. So that's a problem in production for a trifold brochure. Another thing that's a problem is this, and the way that this is set up is this. So you've got, let me just reduce this a little bit in size. Okay, so I want to look at the front and back panels together. Now, so when we see this back panel right here, the fold is right here. This fold is right here, but the front panel, the folds are much more narrow in the center panel. So your panels they're not the same size. And I would recommend you go to the announcements area of the classroom and take a look at this announcement right here, how to design a trifold brochure. There are a ton of resources in here to help you and assist you to correctly set up the trifold brochure to eliminate things like this. So as we can clearly see right now, so this is indicating the folds go right here. This is indicating the folds go right here. So either way you fold this, it's not going to match up on the background. So if you fold it according to this panel here, your folds are going to be right here in the background. So you're going to have that color, other color, and in some areas it looks like there could even be some text or the ends of the text within that panel. Do you see what I'm saying? So what you want to do is make sure that each column is identical on the front and the back. Therefore, when it folds, it should fold together, and it should accommodate all of the placement of the elements within those columns, front and back. Okay, let's talk about typography next. we're looking at justified type, but we see a lot of unusual spaces in our justified type settings here. Justified types can be problematic in this one. See, these spaces is what I'm talking about, these unusual word spaces. You've got some areas that the letters and words are packed really tight together, and some other lines where there's big spaces between words. That's inherent of justified type settings, and we can accommodate for that. And what I would recommend here is to go back to the announcements area and go through this announcement and video right here, how to justify paragraphs correctly. And that'll show you how to get rid of those unsightly gaps in your justified type settings. As far as the actual brochure itself goes, again, let's go. Let me go to this view right here, I think. Okay, so the front cover, again, that image looks like it's a little bit, and I just want to mention also bleeding images on a trifold brochure is extremely difficult because, again, you have to get the output cannot have any mistakes at all. And basically what happens is if there's a misfold here, you're going to get parts of the image in the center panel if this fold isn't spot on correct. So again, that's another issue. So just think about how elements affect other elements in the different columns. And remember that production, quite often, like I said, we need to allow and accommodate for a margin of error in production. Therefore, we try as hard as we can as designers to avoid things like this where that fold would have to be perfect in order for there not to be slivers of color in one panel that are resulting from a misfold. When I say misfold, I'm talking about, I mean, a 1/16 of an inch or less. 32nd of an inch is going to show a little sliver right there. So I'm not talking about production really screwing up the fold. I'm talking about something that is quite feasible and happens all the time. Okay, let's look at the truly make-believe. I think the front cover is pretty good, but I would really concentrate on using a white background or a common color background for the brochure to eliminate those possibilities. Front cover looks good. Back cover, I think the back cover, this little contact here right here, that should be grouped. Remember proximity. Everything that is alike should consider placing it together. So this little contact information right here, I don't really think it has any feasible reason for being on the front cover. I would take that and move it back onto the back cover with the rest of the contact information. Truly make-believe, I would reduce the size of that logo a little bit and then add some sort of a tagline that makes a connection between the logo and the image itself, okay? Then on the back, go ahead and this seems pretty stark. I would try to include as much information as you can. Don't pack it with information. You want to use negative space as much as possible. But you would want to give the address, the telephone number, all the contact information, pertinent contact information, and possibly even the location in this. So you really want to provide as much information as you can without missing any information like contact information, location, etc. These images are a little problematic in that they're assembled on a white background. So that white background, it creates this kind of stark relationship. So I would not use the background in that particular composition of images. This panel right here, as we can see, it's not centered. So the left margin here is much greater than the right margin on that fold. Okay, so watch that. Let's go over to the back. Now, one thing I notice is in the front and the back of the brochure have two different sizes. Okay, so we can clearly see this is much smaller than this type size. Probably a point or two. I shouldn't say much smaller, but it is clearly smaller. And then finally, my final comment is this, and I want to kind of reduce this a little bit. So your brochure doesn't have a whole lot of hierarchy based, and this does, because right here you're giving subheads. Okay, so you're telling the viewer what these individual sections are. The middle of the brochure doesn't have any subheads at all, so it kind of just reads on one kind of run-on paragraph where you're not describing what each paragraph is summarizing. That points to hierarchy, and subheads in that keep hierarchy in mind in all of our projects. You really want to keep hierarchy in mind. So, think about things like subheads. Think about drawing the viewer's attention. Where do you want the viewer to look first in this as a composition? Now, in trifold brochure design, it's tricky. And the reason it's tricky is because you need to create hierarchy within each individual panel, and then you need to create hierarchy as the whole trifold brochure is folded out. Okay, so it has to have hierarchy in individual panels and an overall hierarchy. I think a great way to do that is to add subheads like you've done up here. Other than that, I think that it's a good start. So let's go ahead and concentrate on those comments. Let's get that stuff squared away, and then we'll take a closer look when you start to assemble your final iteration of the brochure. But let's take care of those issues, and please go ahead and post this. Go ahead and address these issues and post this at your leisure, or you can email it to me or whatever, just so I can take a look at it, so we can make sure that everything's in place before we make our final adjustments for the final iteration of the trifold brochure. Okay, great job. Thank you. Good start. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, please let me know as soon as possible. Thank you very much.